Hey guys, welcome to this video that's a little bit about how you can set up some interesting data relationships with Rails 5, Rails 4, any sort of Rails really, but we'll be looking at Rails 5. And one of the interesting things is when you have multiple foreign keys that would go across to a given model. So let's say that there's some users that are salespeople and then some users that are buying puppies, and they have different roles. So there's a customer role and an employee role, and maybe other roles, manager, who knows. And it's all managed through this associative table, a little many-to-many. And also, a pup could have been bought by a customer and sold by an employee, but it ties back to the user role, because consider that if I log on as a given user, I might be both a customer and an employee. Like I could buy a puppy from my own store if I wanted to. So how can you have it that people would log on once and then get multiple possibilities from a given logon? That's kind of what today's video is all about. And along the way, we'll look at, writing tests and seeding data and whatever else. And also, this started at, ended at. People are not always going to be employed. They get riffed sometimes. So maybe they get termed, and so that's an ended at. And you don't actually ever throw away. Like if you say, I want to destroy a given user role, this person is no longer an employee. Well, the ended at would say, all right, don't destroy that row, but let's say that they concluded their employment at this time frame. So you know the time frame that they were a given employee or a manager or whatever role they held. Maybe somebody gets promoted. They were previously an employee, and then now they're not just an employee, they're also a manager person. So it adds a little bit more to it. So that started at a certain time, then they hold now two roles, not just one. So that's a little bit of the basis of today's discussion, and let's go ahead and build a project based on that. We'll do some Rails new dog traders, and we'll omit the normal unit testing and then put in our own in a moment. We'll also do, for the database, PostgreSQL. We'll let that simmer for a little bit. And as that's moving along, I'll open up an additional terminal window and go into the dog traders from within a text editor. We'll modify the gem file just a little bit so that while we are testing, we'll have rspec Rails. That should be good. Also, maybe on the git ignore, note that I have the bundling happening right now, and it's fulfilling all of the bundling things happening then in this vendor folder. There's all the gems that are being drunk in currently, so many. This list will be growing as the bundle is completing. Perhaps then I'd like to git ignore that vendor folder so it doesn't consume a whole bunch of space out on GitHub or whatever repository I've chosen to throw that into. So that should be good. Let's step back over and see how far are we along on the bundling. Still compiling up Nokogiri with its native extensions. This is where Ruby touches C. It's going out and compiling and looking at headers and things and making sure that it can interact with it. All right, moving right along. Not too much longer and it'll be sorted. In the meantime, consider that from the perspective of a user, I might want to ask, what are all the puppies that I have sold if I was an employee? Or what are all the puppies that I have bought if I'm a customer? And so this sort of a couple of hops along the way, if you will call it that, will be established by having, well, user has many user roles, obviously, but from user role, it has many user roles as a buyer and user roles as a seller. So we'll have a couple of different has-manys over in this model, ultimately. Further then, going back, the pup will belongs to user role in the context of who bought the pup and also who sold the pup. So two different belongs tos will exist. Could not find gem rspec Rails. Of course not. We had just edited that file, so let's go ahead and do a bundle again well, after changing into dog traders, do a bundle again. And that looks good. We have our gem on board. Let's do a Rails G rspec install. Now we have everything prepared to write some tests. And as we go along, those 4 different models that you saw just a moment ago, well, let's build a couple of those. Rails G model for user. They have a name. Maybe they also have like an email and a password digest. Who knows what else? You can put anything in their phone number, address, something. So we have that model on board. And we'll also do Rails G rspec model for user, so that we get the file that we can write some tests in as well. We'll want that along the way as we go. How about we build out the role? Notice that I'm building from kind of the outside in as you look at these things. I've built out a model for user, built out a model for role. I need to go in this kind of sequence because user role depends on both those guys. So I can't just like start in the middle here. I have to have the outside guys as the arrows are pointing. It's kind of a sequence that I need to follow. So for the role, I just have a name on it. And maybe we'll have some tests surrounding role in the future. We could always run one of these kinds of commands to be able to get that to happen. Currently, I won't worry about it. How about we keep moving down the chain and have some user role? We won't yet build out pup, but let's just build out user role at this stage. So Rails G model, user role, and that has a tie both to user and to role. And it also has the started at and ended at as being date times that indicate exactly when a given role is valid for a given user. We might call this kind of an idea a type 2 table. A slowly changing dimension is another name for that. If you want to look more at how this kind of type 2 stuff works, by the way, I have a gem called type 2, it's appropriate I guess, that allows you to just automatically have this kind of thing happen. And you don't have to monkey around a lot with trying to make it happen under the hood. Now that we've built out these various different migrations and models, let's go and see what they look like. Under app, in models, we've got those 3. And for the user role, it says that it belongs to those other guys, user and role, which makes some sense. But for user and role, they don't say that they necessarily relate to either user role or the other guy. So from user, we'll go out and say that it has many user roles. And then it also has many roles through user roles. If you're not familiar with this kind of syntax, we just invite you to brush up a little bit about how Rails works or what have you. Kind of a cool little trick to be able to kind of go 2 hops away or more. You can has many something else from there if there was another layer that you wanted to go to, like if roles had another category or something, like you can then has many categories through roles or something else like that. All right, that's good for the user model for the moment. And we'll go over to the role and do a similar thing. So it has many. Just have to go 1 hop away at a time. So the next hop over will be just the middle table there, user roles. Also then we can go from there further. The sequence is important here. Users through user roles. Great. Now we can go out and write a little bit of code to do some testing. There was that we had indicated in the spec. We had built out these files when we had done that Rails G rspec install. And then when we did that, we wanted to set up an rspec model. Well, there's one of them, a user spec, that was put together for us. Don't necessarily need to say it's rspec, that's just understood. So we're describing user, the type is a model. Add some examples. I kind of like to put together some sample data that like every test can use. So perhaps I'll put together a helper file. Maybe something C data helper. And inside of that file, we'll have a module that's designed to seed some data. And I don't know if you're aware, but you can not just include modules, which is kind of neat, but you can also extend a given class or object based on a given module. So when it gets extended, we can call this thing self.extended, and whatever object is being actually extended, we can then do something with it. And so we can say, for that given object that is being extended, run some code. Instance execute, do some sort of a block of code. And it could be something like set up instance variables. So then that would be available straight away on that given object. So that's kind of cool. Why don't we make it that we actually work with these models that we are talking about? So we'll say, like we've got a user, for instance, we'll set up a new user. Fred is equal to user create and the name of Fred. And we could have put together his email and set up a password and whatever else if we wanted to. Those are other fields that I just put in there for example, I guess. I just only care necessarily about the name. We've got maybe Sally is another user. And how about Joe? This is just for ease of use when we're doing different testing, because we're going to have different roles on these people. At least there'll be like a customer role and an employee role that could have sold the pups to people and stuff. So got these various users on board. And then we've got, how about the roles? Let's build some of those as well. We have a customer role. And we've got an employee role. Cool. Maybe even a manager role, how about? And then maybe I'd like to say that certain users are of a certain role. So how can I establish stuff in that middle table? I could do something like user role create, and then the user is, let's say, Fred, and then the role is employee. Let's say that Fred's both an employee, but also Fred is a manager. How else could I have said this? This is like one way to see that kind of data. Perhaps the most explicit way to build a user role. There is, though, a much easier way with shoveling in this kind of information. So we can say now like Fred dot roles, because we had the thought that from user we understand something called roles. So from user has many roles through something. Whenever we have one of these has many throughs, guess what? We can build out that data with a shovel operation. So let's shovel in simply manager. So now both Fred is an employee and also a manager. Shovel that right on board. Let's also then set up Sally as being both an employee and also as being a customer. So Sally roles shovel in employee. We could have gone the other direction, by the way, because we have that has many through from the roles side. So could I say like customer dot users shovel in Sally? That's kind of just turning it around, if you will. So both of those should work. Another way to be able to build this kind of thing out could be customer, so that given role dot users dot create. So there's not maybe an easier way, but not as easy, but an alternative. These are three different approaches to be able to put that together. I kind of prefer the shovel operator just because it's so succinct, but you know, your mileage may vary. Oh, you know what? I goofed this up. User roles create is what I should have said there. So the customer.userRoles.create, and then we'll just say which the user is that we want to have a part of that, and that happens to be Joe. So in my opinion, not as easy, but it is an alternative. And what if we wanted to go the other direction? Like from Joe, we want to say that his user roles would have something that has a role of also a employee. So long story short, we have Fred is an employee and a manager. Sally is an employee and a customer. And also, at this point, Joe is an employee and a customer as well. So Sally and Joe are kind of same sort of ability there. Great. That'll provide, we hope, some seed data. Let's balance everything out there. Save that out there. And in our spec, we would then simply need to require that. That'll be seed data helper. And then further, we could have, before we do any tests, run some code. We want to extend from seed data that we had just built out. When we do this, extending seed data, it goes in and it finds that given module, the seed data module found in the seed data helper. And then it does the extend, which essentially calls all of this on whatever context I'm working in right now. Whoever I am, whatever self is, it calls it on that. So now we need to apparently like add some examples. All right. What should we say? From a user's perspective, I should be able to find a given user based on the role. Like Sally is both a customer and an employee. What if I was able to like find a user role based on a user and a role? Wouldn't that be cool? So let's say here, like based on Sally, we would want to say that like some user role, Sally as a customer maybe. So expect that user role, expect that guy, the role on it, to equal customer. So of course, like none of this code exists. We're just writing what we want to be able to run. The other seed file, we don't even know if that will work, I guess. Let's see if any part of this even is functional. So bundle exec rspec will look for the spec folder and try to run all tests that it finds inside of there. And of course we get this horrible thing here because we don't even have a database around. My goodness. Let's make that all work. We'll do, this is Rails 5, so we can do like Rails db create. Now at least the database exists. And to cut to the chase, I could do the migrate. I guess we'll look at how it's going to fail horribly here. Bundle exec rspec. Where's your tables, man? So it's telling us just do a Rails db migrate. For the test environment, let's go ahead and migrate this guy. Now, bundle exec rspec, and it's gotten a bit further along. User should find a user role based on a user and a role, so it maybe then built out all this stuff. We can take a look a little later and see, but undefined method as a for a user. I guess let's go ahead and put that in place. What might that look like? I think I want to have it actually not just as a given string, but also if I could write as an actual role object, that would be sure nice. So expect it this way, role as a string. What about role as an object? We'll copy and paste that around. Role as an object. Sally as a customer. Also, a couple different examples there. Well, time for us to write the code to implement all of this, and that's the as code as a given role. For this given user, we return the user roles that we have found by just that given role. That will hopefully find it if like role is an object, but certainly it won't really work too well if role is a string. One of our two examples will start passing hopefully at this point. Let's see. Yeah, that's good. We had a little bit of success there, but still, like role as a string, it's like, what are you talking about? So what if role was a string? I'm going to write the if statement first, but it's just going to be a one-liner eventually. So if role.class is string, then what? What do we do if that is a string? How about we do role is equal to role find by the name is the role. So we're just replacing the role variable with an actual role object if the role was a string. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. And then maybe we pass both of our tests now. Yeah, all right, that's cool. So it found Sally, it found customer, it all hooked up apparently. All right, now I have to think, where do I go from here?
To poison ivy.
Yeah! Do you want to dance? No?
Why?
I mean, you were pointing at yourself after we said poison ivy, so I thought like that you might want to dance out there.
No, I'm in Paul. That might be painful.
Yeah, trouble. I think let's now also leverage this same seed data helper thing as being something that even like if you do a Rails DB seed, it also uses the same stuff. How can we put that on board? In DB, there's that seeds file. We can require Rails root and join up a part of the path. How about in the spec folder, we've got seed data helper. So spec seed data helper. We don't have to specify .rb. It's inferred when we do require or require relative. After requiring that, we would just go and extend seed data. And that'll make it all happen. Let's go out and seed for the development environment then. When we had done that Rails DB migrate, it built the tables not only in development, but also in test. Like you saw it work in test. And then also, by the way, it does exist in development. So by the way, we can confirm that by saying Rails DB. And then this opens up Postgres so that we can do a listing of all the tables. And sure enough, they're there. Users and roles and so forth. There's some other couple internal tables, by the way, as well. Like schema migrations indicates all the different migration codes that have been run so far. So if we do select splat from schema migrations, put a semicolon at the end of that, these are the 3 migrations that have thus been run at this point. So it's all there. We have our tables in development as well as in test. 2 databases have been built out. Let's now try to do the seed. Because if we did a Rails C and did like user.count, it says nobody's there. All right, but if we do a Rails DB seed, it should try to run that test helper file and make it all seeded. And now if we look at Rails C and then user account, well, we've got 3 of them. Incidentally, now we could do something like user.second. I seem to remember that the second person that we built out happened to be Sally. Let's see. User.second.name is Sally. There she is. So user.second, that is Sally. User.second as a customer is this user role. User role 4 in this case, apparently. And then user.second as an employee. Oh, happens to be user role 3. So we can now use this as a to find out the user role associated with a given user as they're acting in a certain context, if that all makes sense. I hope this is helpful. Like the thing that we're trying to do here is single sign-on. Somebody logs in once, and then they can wear multiple hats. Like Sally could both sell a puppy to somebody and then also buy a puppy from somebody. We might want to make some validation so that she's not like selling puppies to herself and giving herself steep discounts or something interesting like that. Anyway, that's for another day, I think. Validators in that respect. From the context of Sally, by the way, so user.second, can we find out all of the roles that she holds? Maybe we do like a roles.map and then find just the names of all the roles that you find. Apparently, customer and employee is in the mix. From any given user, we can identify all of the roles because why? We have the has many user roles, first of all, but then also we have the has many roles through user roles. You know, actually, we could also then go from the context of a given role. So like role.first happens to be customer. Who all is customers? So role.first.users.map their names. Who's in the customer's role? It's Sally and Joe are customers. And role.second. Fred, Sally, and Joe are all employees. Is that right? I think so. And the third and final role happens to be manager. Apparently only Fred's a manager. And notice, when we have a has many through, it writes a select statement with an inner join. It did actually two different selects. It first of all had found out, well, what is the role that you're talking about? Because role.third, what is the third role? It's with an offset of 2. Don't get the first one, skip 2 of them, and get the third one, see? So that's role.third. And then from that given role.third, apparently that was a role ID of 3. So find from that given third role all of the users joining in user roles. And incidentally, we could steal this. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard now and bail out and go back out to a Rails DB and then just paste in that given select statement that I've just copied in. And instead of this role ID being equal to $1, we find out that it was a role ID of 3, as we see there. And when we run that statement, we see only Fred is a manager. So that's kind of what's happening. If you want to test out some of these select statements, you don't have to trust active record. Oh no, don't just blindly trust active record. Even though I am, I didn't write any tests to confirm that active record is actually working. So apparently I'm thinking that it is, and all I wrote was a test for my own dumb code that I added. I think it's the best practice. However, other people differ, and they think, let's make sure that people do their has many throughs properly, and let's write tests for everything. Whatever floats your biscuit on that, honestly. But you see anyway why we have these in the Rails C environment and in the Rails S environment. Why we show you select statements is so that you can party on that. You can open up Rails DB and experiment like that. For our next trick, we have not built out that fourth model, if I recall. Consider that we have now all of the top layer. We've also, by the way, not had that started at and ended at have any sort of behavior which really acts like a type 2 table at all. Please look at the type 2 gem if you want to have that happen, I guess. But I've just put it out there so you can consider, people don't always continue to be manager or front desk person, back room person, dog exploiter person. I don't know what they are. You can figure out your own roles. They start given roles and they generally move upwards in the ladder and then they finally retire. So there's a definite start and end to their time frame that they are this and are that. I guess customer is the only one that might be, they started as a customer and they can always be a customer. We don't want to ever have them end being a customer, but all the other roles could be something that's finite. Aside from that, let's go ahead and build out this cute model, which apparently has 2 different foreign keys out to user role. We need to know who is buying and who is selling. Let's see what it might look like to build a given pup. So, Rails G model pup. They have a name. They have a buyer ID. I don't have to say ID because references knows how to put that on board. But it's a buyer. Is it a buyer that is a user? It's ambiguous a little bit because the buyer, ultimately we think about a buyer as being actually a person, and maybe we'll make it as such eventually here, but we also think about it right here directly. It's connected only to user role. So I think that we should call it buyer, the user role that is the buyer. And the seller user role. when we say references, it's going to build out something that is buyer URID and seller URID. Let's build out this model. We'll also migrate. This has affected both the development and test databases. Or it like could have, I guess. Something's a little weird. What? Uh-oh, relation buyer URs doesn't exist. I guess we have to modify this migration so that it's not actually a foreign key. Don't treat it as that. There is no actual table that says that it is buyer URs. But just trust me here and build this out, if you will. All right, now we're able to do the migrate. And with that change in place, let's now see how can we wire up. This gets crazy. This is why you came to the video, I guess. How do we make it that for a given pup, it belongs to buyer UR in what way? Golly, there's a lot that we need to add here to indicate that it's going to be effective. All right, first of all, class name. You got to know how that works. Class name is some sort of actual model name for the next guy that this points to. So that is user role. All right. Foreign key. You need that as well. What is the foreign key that ties these guys together? If you were paying attention, apparently you identify that it is buyer URID. We can identify that foreign key, by the way, by looking at the schema RB. And we can identify that here are our foreign keys. Buyer URID, seller URID. We didn't ask for anything more than just buyer UR, but it automatically tacks on _ID when we do references. Awesome. All right. So the foreign key on this one is buyer URID. There's more that we'll have to do eventually here. I think one last thing, because it's Rails 5, I should also say required false. So that if a pup has not yet been bought, it's okay for them still to exist. Hello? Are you saying that this fur pile is not in existence? Okay, you suck if you think that this beautiful puppy, paws and fur and bark, you're trying to say that they don't exist? Okay, we have to allow that we can build a puppy that has not yet been bought. And so required false. And also then, by that same token, has not yet been sold. All of this extra crap has to come along. The last piece, by the way, that is only Rails 5 and later if you are making this kind of a references association. I'm going to copy all of this stuff after the belongs to user R and paste it in for seller UR. And then this is all the same except for instead of buyer, then that's seller URID and required false. So the pup can exist without ever having been bought or sold. It's probable that both will be set up at the same time frame. Somebody buys and somebody sells, and it's like a money trades hands and everything works. What do you think we should do now to our seed information? Maybe we make a couple of pups. How about, what's a good name for a dog?
Rascal.
Rascal. So Rascal is equal to pup create with the name of Rascal. And note that I did not have to supply the who bought it and who sold it because this is just a little newborn. So cute. Any other dogs in the life you think? What would be another?
Some alcohol name.
Ah, Kahlua.
Oh, that's a cool one.
All right. So Kahlua. Hope I spelled that right. There are a couple of different pups in our life now. Let's see if we could actually make these guys bought and sold. Like from a given animal, we can say, based on pup knowing the buyer you are, then who had bought and who had sold. Or from the other side of the coin, let's go ahead and write in some opposites. Consider that belongs to and has many kind of playing against each other. So I'm going to copy these guys and go out to user role. We need some has manys. These are the two that we had from the pup side. I need to write some corresponding sort of opposite has many. Maybe bought pups in context of the UR. Bought pups for the UR is a class name of pup. This is pointing from here in user role across back down. You want to see the picture again? Here it is. We're now modifying this. We added a couple of belongs to's over here in pup, and then now we need to add the has manys that balance it out. That will then have it to be going back and forth. So the class name pup, foreign key is the same. So it's still buyer UR ID. And then there's no need to say that it's required false or true because the enforcement happens on the belongs to side, not on the other side. So that's as simple as that in its simplest form, I guess. This also has many sold pups UR. And a foreign key of seller URID. Could we even go further? From the context of the user, could they leverage these couple of who bought and who sold so we can find out for a given user which are the ones that they bought and which are the ones that they sold? And we'll go back over to user. It has many user roles, so that helps us, but could it also has many bought pups through user roles? That's an intriguing thought. Or for that same sort of a thought, what about sold pups? Employees could have sold the given pups through user roles. This is not enough information to understand which foreign key it should be going through. I mean, bought pups and sold pups are both indicating that they should just go through user roles. So that's not useful yet. If we try it out, I'll go ahead and reseed the data. And by the way, I think that in seeding of the data, we should go and make sure that we clear everything out beforehand. So like pup.destroy all. How about user role destroy all? Maybe then at that point we can say that all the roles are gone and all the users are gone. Every time that we reseed, we clean house at this point. And also, by the way, every time that we run the test, we clean house. So that's nice. That's kind of living large before not having that, honestly. When we reseed our data, it should clean out everything that would exist for these guys. But a problem exists because, undefined local variable or method buyer URID. That's not actually how it should be, is it? All right, let's go back over. And the user role. These are symbols. Sorry if I've led anybody astray on this. I think I screwed that over. Let's try this again. Okay, now we're all seated. So we have now established a couple of pups. They haven't been bought or sold. If we do a Rails C in the development environment, we should see those couple of pups. 2 of them. And then if we find out, well, who has bought or sold, is like just looking at pup.first. first. Nobody's bought or sold this guy. All right, but our little rascal could have been bought or sold by somebody. So after the fact, we can say pup.first.update buyer could be Sally as a buyer. Sally would like to have a beautiful little pup. And then Joe maybe is the seller of this pup. So we could find out wherever Sally is, user find by name Sally as a customer. So that could update that rascal has been bought by Sally. We'd also update that Joe was the employee that had sold that. And now, good old pup.first, our Rascal guy, has the buyers and sellers in place. Let's go out and see what we've built in code. From the user role, we has many bought pups UR. And then from the user, we has many bought pups through user roles. So we're partially there. We're a lot of the way there, actually, to make this all work. Let's go find out the Sally user and see what bought pup she knows about, and see maybe what error message could emerge. So there's some of user find by Sally. That's Sally that we just set up on Rascal before. She's as a customer, but we just want the user object there. So this will find Sally as a user, not as a user role that is a customer. And then if we try to do from there these bought pups, it indicates, it does not know how to figure this out. Could not find the source association for the bought pup or bought pup. That's like the native name that it would try, because it tries to just go by convention. It's trying to go like just based on the name bought pups. I can't find anything called bought pup or bought pups. So is it one of those dumb things or these smart things? Yeah. It's one of those. Apparently, yes, it's because it's one of these bought pups UR. We need to have a source. We need to indicate which one of the 2 foreign keys that it should go down. That is the rest of the story, folks. Bought pups UR. Across the way, in the user role model, that's what we called it. And then correspondingly, sold pups UR. Yeah. Let's confirm that over here, right? So bought pups UR, sold pups UR. It needs to know the source, and the source is of the next guy over, if that makes sense. From the user over to the user role, that has many is what it needs to light up. With those in place, we just need to reload the environment. It has now rethought how all the models work, and if we just go out and try to find the bought pups, magical. It's now gone through 2 different tables to be able to identify from the context of Sally. So it found Sally, first of all. The first select had identified who Sally was. And then from there, it did a select with a join to go from user roles out to pups. See, we're saying we want to find the pups that Sally has bought. And sure enough, she has bought Rascal. What about, in a similar sort of a way, we find from the person who sold it, we find all the sold pups. And sure enough, this is the same pup that those guys had bought and sold. Now there's a little nuance. Maybe we write a test based on this, actually, to identify caching problems that can exist in rare circumstances. We don't want to have that to be evil as such, so let's make this great. If we go back over to our specs, we don't have anything in relation to user roles yet. This next little trick that we'll look at, we'll put a test together for user roles. So let's build one out. Let's bail out a Rails C and the Rails G rspec model for user role. We now have the user role spec. This new file has just come together. In a similar way to how we did the other, we'll do the require of the C data helper and before block where we extend from the C data. And this is the thought. We have a caching problem potentially that could exist. It should properly cache user role objects referenced directly and also through pup. What does that all mean? What we're up against here, if I was to say Sally, even like a given user role is Sally as a customer, and then let's load in one of her pups, like pup is equal to UR from that user role. We'll find bought pups from the perspective of the UR and find the first one, that'll just be Rascal. Wouldn't you think that from the user role of Sally as a customer, the object ID would in fact be equal to the pup's buyer UR object ID? I mean, those should be the same object, I would think. So let's expect UR object ID to equal the pup buyer UR object ID. As we go out and run that test, funnel exec rspec, there's the other user tests that succeed, but we have this failure. Okay, wait. Let's see, undefined method buyer UR for nil class. This is kind of indicating that we actually never sold the pup in the first place, because like that guy is nil, so apparently pup is nil, so apparently I don't think I actually had ever modified our seed data to say that Sally had bought that given pup. I better put that on board here. So for Rascal, I'm doing update a buyer UR Sally as a customer, and based on how this is set up, we probably need those in parentheses. And then the seller UR Joe as a employee. Let's try that. That might work out a little bit better. How do we fail now? All right. Expected one object ID, but got a totally different object ID. We expected the user role having been gotten directly, Sally as a customer, to equal for Rascal, the buyer user role, the same object ID, but it's not. It loaded those user role objects 2 different times and in 2 different places in memory. Not useful. We want them to be the same, and they actually can be the same. This is one of the things we can fix inside of Rails. It was at Rails 4.1 time frame, or 4.2, I can't remember, that we included this thing called inverse of. Before, we did this thing called an identity map in Rails 3 and older, but with this thing inverse of. Let's see how that works with our has manys and our belongs tos. From the side of pup, we find the names here. There's buyer UR, seller UR, and they relate in an inverse way over to the user role. Bought pups UR, sold pups UR is the has many side of that. So bought pups UR is the opposite of, or the inverse of, buyer UR in pups. And then sold pups is the inverse of seller UR. All right. By the way, we can do that here on the has many side. And then with this name, bought pups UR and sold pups UR, we can do that on the opposite side with the belongs tos. So we'll say that that is an inverse of bought pups UR, and the seller side is an inverse of sold pups UR. So now, having added in those inverses, saving that out, rerunning our tests, we're good. That last little step, Google around about it. There's not enough information, I think, about it out there. But in the Rails guides, it's all right in terms of describing kind of what it's up to. But that's what we're up to here is if you experience strange caching stuff happening, especially then when you're like updating one guy and then you're reading it in a different way, like you're updating a user role in this case, and then you're referencing it in context of a pup, you're expecting that that change should have been effective, and however it's not, all right, well then that can be the problem. You might not have your inverse ofs established properly. So altogether, thanks for listening. This is a project that I'd like to do a little bit more with, especially in regards to how type 2 tables might exist. We had put together, from the user role perspective, this started at, ended at. This could be completely in lieu of timestamps, by the way, so I could actually ditch that entirely and then just use the type 2 gem to be able to manage when people had started working as an employee and then when they got riffed and stuff. As you go to try to destroy a given user role, it would actually not destroy it, but rather mark it that it ended at a certain time frame, and then it would cap it off. You would always have all historic information present, which is kind of nice. So you can go back in time, see who used to work in what capacity at any time frame. So we hope that you've enjoyed diving into how you can use users and roles and then have multiple foreign keys to identify some sort of a model that relates to users. You can even have not just these two keys like a buyer and a seller, but rather like for car rental. You could have somebody that is renting the car, but they picked it up from one person at the desk at the car rental agency, and then they dropped it off with another person. So there's like two employees that are referred to in that regard, and then one customer. So that's, again, that's like a different set of foreign keys. That's 3 foreign keys in the mix there. This sort of a pattern I like. I do this in virtually every project that I write that has anything to do with users. So I have something like a user role thing, and then I try to tie into the user role. Sally acting as a customer and Joe acting as an employee, instead of tying things back directly just to a user to say that Sally bought this pup and Joe sold this pup. I don't know as much this way because I don't know which time Joe was working. Maybe Joe started working at one time and then was fired, but then he was hired back again, and then at that second time frame that he sold the pup then to Sally, and his role might have been a little bit different. I don't have any of that information if I've just only said that the pup was sold by a user. If I say that the pup was sold by a user role, then I have a lot more information in the mix. Hope you've had fun. Let's party on Rails.